their family members, began providing all kinds of collateral history that made me realize that at least we owe it to these veterans to create an environment where there are regulated markets, where we can do observational studies on these patients and start to collect some objective data on how patients are responding to this plant. So it's important for you to be aware that the clinical trial I was referring to, this FDA trial, was submitted to the FDA in 2010. So here I am, 6 years later, still unable to enroll our first veteran in this study. That is what the state of marijuana research is in this country right now. As Nicole very eloquently stated in her testimony, the US government has systematically impeded marijuana efficacy research. And I emphasize efficacy because all other cannabis research, what we call safety studies, looking at harmful side effects and addiction potential, those studies get green-lighted all the time without any hindrance. But if you dare say that you want to study the efficacy of cannabis in the US, you will be hindered, you will be thwarted at every turn, and our study is a prime example of that. I won't belabor this, but I would be happy to answer more questions about the myriad ways the government has slowed this study down. We had FDA approval within 5 months of submitting the study design. So I want you to know that it was not the FDA who impeded this work. It's all these other relentless layers of government red tape that have blocked this study. None of these agencies have any timeline. They can take 10 months or 10 years to approve each step of this, and that's where these studies get locked down. But despite that, I just wanted to, despite that, we still have, if you do a simple review of the current literature, you will see over 100 controlled trials published in peer-reviewed medical journals confirming the therapeutic benefits of this plant. And what I've done, if you guys have seen these, the fact sheets that we put together, so I was just recently in Utah, and just so you know, I've testified in front of now 9 different legislators, 9 different states in front of their state legislatures who all now have medical cannabis laws, and I'm very proud of that participation. That's why I'm here today, because I feel so strongly. It's impossible for me to listen to testimony, for instance, from Nicole, without being powerfully and emotionally moved by their comments. And so I hope that today we begin the process where common sense prevails in Ohio, and you guys can create a regulated markets for safe legal access for these sick and debilitated patients. So if you would take a look at these fact sheets, we prepared these for the state of Utah, who is now, Utah is grappling with a medical marijuana bill there. And Utah, surprisingly, has one of the biggest opioid overdose epidemics in the country. Even though they're such a conservative state, it was surprising to me because they're looking at medical cannabis, and a comprehensive medical cannabis law now, because they've had a CBD-only law for over a year, and they're not serving their patients. They have about 20 patients enrolled in a clinical trial, a very, underwhelming clinical trial on pediatric epilepsy. Sadly, all the rest of, thousands and thousands of other Utah patients are left in the cold, not able to gain access to lab-tested cannabis. So what I've done with these facts, we worked with the Drug Policy Project of Utah and organized all of the peer-reviewed literature we could find on each of these debilitating conditions. So for instance, if you take chronic pain, if you look on the back of the sheet, you'll see where we've galvanized all the relevant peer-reviewed literature so that you guys, when you are constantly confronted by other legislators with this notion that there's no science to support cannabis as medicine, I want you to show them these fact sheets and show that there really is an impressive body of scientific literature that already exists. There is ample data to support cannabis as medicine. And so I also want to point out that I live in a medical marijuana state. So for the last 5 years, Arizona has had a comprehensive medical marijuana law that has been very successful. I was hugely dubious that this program, how could a medical marijuana program not veer into a recreational program? But we have managed to prevent that. We have kept our program truly medical, and I think we are one of the states in this country that is exemplary, that has a lot of good things to learn from, and we also have some disadvantages that I also would be delighted to point out to you. So in this packet, you'll see I tried to compile all the data. If you look through, for instance, slide here, you'll see this page says Arizona Medical Cannabis Program. I tried to summarize all of our data so you can see what your medical cannabis program might look like in 5 years, 4 or 5 years. And you can see here, for instance, in Arizona, we have 90,000 patients that are card holders. And I've actually made a picture of the card because if you look on the next slide where you see this green card, this is, a lot of people have never even seen a medical cannabis card. It's important for you to know that this thing is so secure. We've got all kinds of protections in the card to prevent counterfeiting, and in 5 years, we've not seen a single case of the card being counterfeited. We have 88 dispensaries statewide that are in very diverse geography all over. We have a lot of rural territory in Arizona, and we have dispensaries in virtually every part of the state that is not Native American reservation land. We have about 60 cultivation centers statewide, and we have a program that is delivering medicine, this plant, in all formulations. So it's not just oil. They're provided flour if they request it, and flour that can either be vaporized or smoked. We provide edibles. We have very secure packaging, child-resistant packaging. We've learned from early mistakes because we were one of the early adopters of medical cannabis in this country. So at this point, I'd like to, I know we're short on time. If you don't mind, I'd like to stop and just be able to address your questions. And anything is fair game. If you want to ask about our clinical trial, if you want to ask about Arizona, feel free.
I'm going to ask you a question. As a physician, you're doing phase 2 trials.
Yes, sir.
And going back to what the sheriff asked, so it has been through phase 1 trials with the FDA. In the phase 1, they are looking at the safety of the drug.
Yes.
And now in phase 2, you're looking at, does it work? Does it do what it's supposed to do?
Exactly. Yes.
And so in certain forms, it has been proven by the FDA. And it has been approved in some forms in Europe, and it's gone through whatever their FDA is called in Europe.
Yeah.
And they're using it there.
Yes, yes, sir, that's true. So we are looking at both safety and efficacy in the same study. Our phase 2 trial looks at 76 military veterans with PTSD over 2 different sites. My site, my laboratory in Phoenix, and our site at Johns Hopkins University. So we will, but sadly, because this study has been suppressed for so many years, and we still don't have any indication when the federal government will sell us the study drug. We've been waiting, years now for cannabis study drug from the University of Mississippi. It took them 20 months to grow the study drug. Now the DEA is supposedly evaluating our protocol. Again, we've been waiting for months. We have no timeline from them about when the study drug will be available to us. So you can see why it's so impossible to get researchers to participate in this work. That's why we've been fighting so hard to end the barriers to research. But we've been fighting for 20 years to end these barriers. This isn't new. My sponsor is called MAPS, is a nonprofit based in Santa Cruz. They've been fighting to end the Public Health Service review, which delayed our study 3 years for no reason. During that time, 24,000 veterans killed themselves. But the PHS review sat on our study protocol for 3 years and didn't require any protocol changes. So this is what we're up against. And I would say, even if our study started tomorrow, we would still be 3 years from obtaining publishable data. And so it's really critical that you let the testimony from these patients really weigh heavily in your deliberations, because it is so essential that these patients get access to lab-tested cannabis now. These folks can't wait, and we've already proven in 23 other states that this program can be managed responsibly. And so I'm hoping that what you can do is take the best out of all these different states that are, well, I'm bringing you in March a regulator from Maryland who will be an incredible spokesperson. The Maryland medical cannabis law is one of the most exemplary in the country. And I think they have done everything right in terms of having really rigorous lab testing requirements, really extensive options for formulations of cannabis. That's critical. Patients need access to choices. When you're sick and debilitated and you're used to smoking cannabis, that's what you need to be allowed to do. You can't force people to change midstream and force them into our paradigm for how marijuana should be utilized. It's taken me a long time to get to that point. Believe me, I have been and continue to be very anti-smoking in my practice. I spent 10 years of my life fighting to get the Smoke-Free Workplace Act passed in Arizona. Now I'm the principal investigator on a smoking study. It's an unbelievable irony, but it's also a testament to the fact that my thinking has evolved based on science. And the science on smoking cannabis is surprisingly benign. And even the FDA was so impressed by the studies, the Tashkin studies that you may have seen already, looking at the effect of smoking cannabis on the pulmonary system, couldn't uncover any long-term pulmonary complication, no malignancy, no emphysema. In fact, many of the patients in these studies had improved pulmonary function. So I was stunned by this, and the FDA was equally impressed to the point where they approved a smoking protocol for our study. So all of our veterans in the study will be smoking, which is what they do. Most of our veteran community does smoke. So we're trying to do a real-world study and imitate what veterans do day to day, and this is really very helpful that the FDA was open to that. They recognize this is botanical medicine. It needs to be handled differently than standard medicine. It's important for you guys to know that the FDA also approved a self-titration protocol, and I know this was a big discussion just now. It's important that you see that the FDA, even though they preferred fixed dosing, we spent months with the FDA who are physician investigators. These aren't law enforcement. So they wanted to make this study work, and they listened to our arguments, and they eventually agreed to a self-titration protocol because they